The gentle caress of dawn had barely touched the horizon when Josephine Owens found herself standing in front of McGinty's general store, clutching the remnants of her once hopeful life, a wedding dress that had never fulfilled its promise. Her stomach growled with a ferocity that mirrored the desperation in her eyes as she pushed open the weathered door, the bell announcing her arrival with a cheerful jingle that seemed to mock her circumstances. The year was 1875, and Durango, Colorado was as unforgiving as the surrounding mountains that towered over the dusty town. The mining boom had begun to wane, leaving many to struggle in its wake. Josephine was among them, having arrived 6 months prior with dreams that had since turned to dust. "Mr. McGinty," she said, her voice barely above a whisper as she approached the counter. The older man looked up from his ledger, his spectacles perched precariously on his nose. "I was wondering if you might be interested in a trade." She carefully unfolded the parcel she carried, revealing the ivory silk and delicate lace of a wedding dress that had never seen its intended day. It gleamed even in the dim light of the store, a stark contrast to Josephine's threadbare dress and hollow cheeks. "It's French lace," she explained, running her fingers along the intricate pattern. "From New Orleans, I need food, Mr. McGinty, just some basics to get by." The storekeeper's eyes softened with pity, but he shook his head. "Miss Owens, it's a beautiful dress, but I've no use for such finery. Can't sell it here, no one's looking for fancy wedding dresses these days." The bell over the door jangled again, and Josephine turned to see a tall figure silhouetted against the morning light. When he stepped inside, she saw a man perhaps a few years older than her 22 years, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of prairie grass after rain. His clothes were dusty from the trail, but the quality of his duster and the silver conchos on his belt spoke of a man who wasn't struggling to survive. "Morning, Mr. McGinty," the newcomer said, removing his hat to reveal hair the color of wheat ready for harvest. "Got that order of fence posts in yet?" "Just yesterday, Mr. Grayson. They're out back. I'll have the boy load them onto your wagon." The stranger, Mr. Grayson, nodded his thanks, then turned his attention to Josephine and the dress spread across the counter. His eyes lingered on the garment before traveling to her face. "Pardon my intrusion, madam," he said with a slight tip of his head. "Couldn't help but overhear. You're looking to trade that dress for food?" Josephine felt heat rise to her cheeks. There was no shame in surviving, she reminded herself, but still, having a stranger witness her desperation stung. "Yes," she replied simply, lifting her chin slightly. "I have no use for it anymore, and as you can see, it's in perfect condition." The man studied her for a moment longer, then turned to McGinty. "I'll take the dress, and you'll give the lady whatever she needs." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather pouch, counting out several gold coins onto the counter. "This should cover it, and then some." McGinty's eyes widened at the gold. "Yes, sir, Mr. Grayson, that'll certainly cover a fair bit." Josephine stared at the stranger, bewildered. "Sir, I don't understand. Why would you want a wedding dress?" A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Riley Grayson," he introduced himself, extending a hand. "I own the Double G Ranch about 10 miles west, and as for the dress, let's just say I believe things of beauty shouldn't be traded away for mere survival if they can be preserved." His words were kind, but Josephine's pride bristled. "I'm not looking for charity, Mr. Grayson, and I'm not offering any," he replied evenly. "I'm making a purchase, but I do have one condition." The smile reached his eyes now. "That someday you might consider wearing it again." Josephine's breath caught in her throat. "I don't understand." "Neither do I, fully," Riley admitted with a small laugh. "But I'd like to help beyond just today's groceries. My foreman's wife is looking for someone to help with the cooking at the ranch. It's honest work, fair pay, and a roof over your head. And perhaps, in time, you might find a reason to wear that dress for its intended purpose." The suggestion hung in the air between them, audacious and impossible. Josephine looked from the dress to the gold coins to the tall stranger with the kind eyes. "Mr. Grayson, you don't even know me." True enough, he conceded. But I'd like to. Starting with why a woman like you is alone in Durango trading away her wedding dress for food. There was no judgment in his tone, only genuine curiosity and that inexplicable kindness that had already changed the course of her day. Josephine found herself telling him her story, how she'd come west with her fiancé Charles to start a new life, how he'd abandoned her after losing their savings in a card game, how she'd been scraping by on seamstress work that had dried up when the mines began to close. Riley listened without interruption, his expression growing darker at the mention of her former fiancé. When she finished, he nodded once decisively. Well, Miss Owens, the offer stands. A job at the Double G if you want it. As for the dress. He carefully folded it and wrapped it back in its paper. I'll keep it safe until you decide what you want to do with it. Josephine looked at the dress, at the promise it represented, and then at Riley Grayson, a stranger offering her not just food for today, but a chance for tomorrow. I accept, she said finally. The job, that is. As for the dress, we'll see. Riley's smile broadened, revealing a dimple in his left cheek. Excellent. Finish your shopping, Miss Owens. I'll ready the wagon. As Riley stepped outside, Josephine turned back to McGinty, who was watching the exchange with undisguised interest. Well, miss, the storekeeper said, seems your luck's turned around. Riley Grayson is a good man, one of the few who made his fortune honestly in these parts. Now, what supplies will you be needing today? For the first time in months, Josephine allowed herself to fill a basket without counting every penny. Flour, sugar, coffee, salt pork, beans, and even a small jar of honey found their way into her provisions. When she'd finished, McGinty tallied the items and handed her the change from Riley's payment, enough to buy new clothes and still have savings. Outside, Riley had loaded his purchases and was waiting patiently by a well-maintained wagon drawn by 2 healthy bay horses. He helped Josephine onto the seat, handling her as carefully as he had the wedding dress, then climbed up beside her and clicked to the horses. As they pulled away from Durango, Josephine felt a curious mixture of trepidation and relief. She was leaving behind months of struggle, but heading toward an unknown future with a man she'd just met. Yet something about Riley Grayson's steady presence beside her made her feel more secure than she had since arriving in Colorado. It's about 2 hours to the ranch, Riley said, breaking the companionable silence that had fallen between them. We've had good rains this year, so the land's looking better than it has in some time. Have you been in Colorado long? Josephine asked, genuinely curious about this man who had so abruptly changed her circumstances. Born and raised, Riley replied. My father started the Double G with just 20 head of cattle and a dream. When he passed 5 years ago, he left me 800 head and 15,000 acres. There was pride in his voice, but also a touch of sorrow. Been building on what he started ever since. That's impressive, Josephine said sincerely. My father was a school teacher back in St. Louis. He always wanted more for us, but never quite managed to achieve it. Riley glanced at her. And yet he raised a daughter with enough courage to come west and start over. Seems to me he achieved quite a lot. The simple observation brought unexpected tears to Josephine's eyes. She blinked them away, focusing on the landscape unfolding around them as the wagon climbed steadily away from town. The rugged beauty of the mountains and forests was something she'd scarcely had time to appreciate during her months of struggle. It's beautiful country, she murmured. That it is, Riley agreed. Though it can be harsh if you don't know how to work with it instead of against it. Your former fiancé, he wasn't prepared for that reality, I take it? Josephine sighed. Charles saw the West as a place to get rich quick. When that didn't happen, he found other diversions. The gambling was bad enough, but then he started drinking. She trailed off, unwilling to revisit those painful memories. Riley didn't press. Well, Miss Owens, I can promise you the Double G offers honest work and fair treatment. Mrs. Fletcher, the foreman's wife, is a good woman. Stern but kind. She'll show you the ropes in the kitchen. As Riley had predicted, it was just over 2 hours later when they crested a hill and the double G spread out before them. Josephine couldn't hide her surprise. She'd expected something substantial based on Riley's description, but the reality exceeded her imagination. The main house was a grand 2-story affair of timber and stone, with wide porches and many windows. Around it clustered a collection of outbuildings, a bunkhouse, a barn, stables, and what looked to be a cookhouse. In the distance, she could see cattle grazing on lush pastureland, while closer to the house, a vegetable garden flourished beside what appeared to be an orchard. "This is not what I expected," Josephine admitted as Riley guided the wagon down the hill. He laughed. "What were you imagining? A one-room cabin with a dirt floor? Perhaps not quite that rustic, but certainly not this." She gestured to the impressive homestead. "It's practically a small town. We've got about 20 hands working the ranch full-time, plus seasonal help during roundup and branding," Riley explained. "Everyone eats at the cookhouse. That's where you'll be working with Mrs. Fletcher. The hands live in the bunkhouse, and the married couples have cabins scattered around the property. My father built the main house with an eye toward the future, said he wanted it filled with family someday." There was something wistful in his voice that made Josephine wonder about Riley Grayson's own dreams for the future. Before she could ponder it further, they pulled up in front of the cookhouse, and a stout woman with gray streaked hair emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mr. Riley. Wasn't expecting you back so soon," she called, then eyed Josephine with undisguised curiosity. Riley jumped down from the wagon and went around to help Josephine. "Mrs. Fletcher, this is Miss Josephine Owens. She'll be helping you in the kitchen, as we discussed." The older woman's face lit up. "Oh, thank the Lord. These cowboys eat like they've got hollow legs, and my own are getting too old for all the standing." She bustled forward to take Josephine's hand. "Welcome to the Double G, Miss Owens. I hope you know your way around a kitchen." "I do," Josephine assured her with a smile. "Though perhaps not on the scale you're accustomed to. You'll learn quick enough," Mrs. Fletcher said confidently. "Come along now, I'll show you where you'll be staying and get you settled in." Riley cleared his throat. "Miss Owens's things will need to be brought from town." "I'll send one of the hands tomorrow." Josephine turned to him, suddenly embarrassed. "That won't be necessary, Mr. Grayson. What you see is what I have." Understanding dawned in his eyes, quickly replaced by that same gentle determination she'd witnessed in the store. "Then we'll need to remedy that. Mrs. Fletcher, would you be so kind as to make a list of what Miss Owens might need? I'll see that it's ordered from Denver on the next supply run." Before Josephine could protest this additional generosity, Riley tipped his hat to both women. "I'll leave you in Mrs. Fletcher's capable hands, Miss Owens. Welcome to the Double G." With that, he was gone, striding toward the main house with the wrapped wedding dress tucked carefully under his arm. Josephine watched him go, still not entirely convinced that the events of the day were real. "He's a good man, Mr. Riley," Mrs. Fletcher said, following Josephine's gaze. "Not like some of these ranchers who think they own everything and everyone around them, treats his people fair and expects an honest day's work in return." She gave Josephine a shrewd look. "Now, how about we get you settled, and you can tell me how you came to catch his eye?" Over the weeks that followed, Josephine found herself settling into life at the Double G with surprising ease. The work was hard up before dawn to help prepare breakfast for hungry ranch hands, then cleaning, baking, and preparing lunch, followed by dinner preparations and more cleaning, but it was purposeful work, and Mrs. Fletcher proved to be a patient teacher and lively companion. The foreman's wife was also an endless font of information about the ranch and its owner. Josephine learned that Riley had expanded the operation significantly since his father's passing, investing in better breeding stock and increasing the size of their herd. He was respected in the territory, known for his fair dealings and willingness to help neighbors in need. "Could have married any girl in 3 counties," Mrs. Fletcher confided one afternoon as they kneaded bread dough. Has had plenty of offers, 2 ranchers' daughters, merchants' widows, even a banker's sister from Denver. But he always says the same thing, he's waiting for the right match. Josephine tried not to examine why this information pleased her. She saw Riley regularly. He made a point of visiting the cookhouse at least once a day, ostensibly to check on operations, but invariably finding time to speak with her. Their conversations ranged from books they'd read to childhood memories to discussions of current events gleaned from the newspapers that arrived sporadically from Denver. One evening in late September, nearly 2 months after her arrival at the Double G, Josephine was returning to her small cabin after finishing the dinner service when she found Riley waiting on her porch, a package in his hands. "Mr. Grayson," she said, surprised. They had developed a friendly rapport, but he had never sought her out at her quarters before. "Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine, Miss Owens," he assured her, standing as she approached. "I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to give you this." He held out the package. The supply wagon returned from Denver today. Josephine accepted the parcel, unwrapping it to find a beautiful leather-bound journal and a fine fountain pen. "You mentioned that you used to enjoy writing," Riley explained when she looked up at him questioningly. "I thought perhaps you might like to take it up again." The thoughtfulness of the gift touched her deeply. "Thank you," she said simply, running her fingers over the smooth cover. "I haven't written anything beyond shopping lists in years." "Perhaps it's time to start again," Riley suggested. He hesitated, then added, "I also wanted to invite you to dinner at the main house, tomorrow evening if you're amenable." Josephine blinked in surprise. "Dinner, just us?" A hint of color touched Riley's cheeks above his beard. "Yes. I realize it might seem forward, but we've known each other for some time now, and I thought, well, I'd like to spend more time with you outside of your work duties." The invitation hung between them, transforming the air into something charged with possibility. Josephine found herself nodding before she'd fully processed her answer. "I'd like that," she said softly. Relief and pleasure warmed Riley's expression. "Wonderful, 6 o'clock. And please don't worry about helping Mrs. Fletcher with dinner service. I've already spoken with her." "You were that confident I'd accept?" Josephine asked, raising an eyebrow. Riley grinned, the dimple appearing in his cheek. "Not confident, hopeful." The distinction made her smile. "Then I'll see you at 6, Mr. Grayson." "Riley," he corrected gently. "I think after all this time you might call me Riley." "Riley," she repeated, savoring the familiarity. "And you must call me Josephine." "Josephine," he said, as if testing the sound of it. "Until tomorrow, then." As he walked away into the gathering dusk, Josephine clutched the journal to her chest, feeling as if she stood on the edge of something momentous, something that had been set in motion the moment a stranger bought a wedding dress and asked her to wear it again. The following evening found Josephine standing before the small mirror in her cabin, critically assessing her appearance. The dress she wore was one of several Riley had insisted on providing as part of her necessities, a deep blue cotton with subtle embroidery at the collar and cuffs. With her hair arranged in a simple but elegant style and a touch of rose water at her wrists and throat, she looked more like her former self than she had in months. The walk to the main house gave her time to calm her nerves, though they returned in full force when she mounted the steps to the broad front porch. Before she could knock, the door swung open to reveal Riley, dressed in clean trousers and a crisp white shirt, his hair neatly combed. "Josephine," he greeted her, his eyes traveling appreciatively over her appearance. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy. "You look quite handsome yourself." He ushered her into a spacious entry hall, then led her through to a dining room where the table was set for 2 with fine china and crystal that must have been transported at great expense from the East. "This is lovely," Josephine said, genuinely impressed. "I didn't realize ranchers dined so formally," Riley laughed. "They don't, usually, but my mother insisted on maintaining certain standards, even in the wilderness." She said civilization was carried in the small things, proper table settings, good manners, appreciation for beauty. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was, Riley agreed, pulling out a chair for Josephine. I think you would have liked each other. Dinner was a delight: tender venison with roasted vegetables and fresh bread, followed by an apple tart that Josephine recognized as Mrs. Fletcher's handiwork. The conversation flowed as easily as the wine Riley poured, moving from light topics to more personal revelations. I never wanted to come west initially, Riley admitted as they lingered over dessert. I had dreams of attending university in Boston, perhaps becoming a lawyer, but my father fell ill and the ranch needed tending. He shrugged. I've never regretted staying. This land gets into your blood. I understand that, Josephine said. Despite everything, I've grown to love it here, the vastness of it, the sense of possibility. Is that why you came west? For possibility? Josephine considered the question, partly, and partly because Charles was persuasive. He painted such a vivid picture of the life we would build together. She traced the rim of her wineglass. I wanted to believe him. Riley's expression darkened slightly at the mention of her former fiancé. Some men make promises they have no intention of keeping. And some men keep promises they never formally made, Josephine countered, looking directly at him. Like taking in a desperate woman and giving her a chance to rebuild her life. Riley's eyes softened. You've done the rebuilding yourself, Josephine. I merely provided the opportunity. Nevertheless, I'm grateful. She hesitated, then asked the question that had lingered in her mind for weeks. May I ask, why did you do it? Why help me that day in the store? Riley was quiet for a long moment, contemplating his answer. I could say it was simple Christian charity or that any decent man would have done the same, but the truth is, he met her gaze steadily. The moment I saw you standing there, so proud despite your circumstances, something inside me recognized something in you. As if I'd been waiting to find you without knowing I was searching. The honesty of his answer stole Josephine's breath. That's quite a confession. Too forward, he asked, a hint of vulnerability in his question. No, she assured him. Unexpected, perhaps, but not unwelcome. Relief washed over his features, followed by determination. Josephine, I know we've known each other only a short time, but I find myself thinking of you constantly. Your strength, your grace, your kindness with everyone from the youngest ranch hand to Mrs. Fletcher's cantankerous old cat. He reached across the table, his hand open in invitation. I'm not asking for any declarations from you tonight. I only want you to know that my interest in you goes beyond employer and employee, and if you might share even a fraction of that interest. Josephine placed her hand in his, marveling at how right it felt. I do, she said simply. The smile that broke across Riley's face was like sunrise on the mountains. Then might I court you properly, Josephine Owens, with your permission, of course. I think I'd like that very much, she replied, returning his smile with one of her own. The weeks of autumn passed in a golden haze for Josephine. True to his word, Riley courted her with old-fashioned courtesy, escorting her to church in town on Sundays, bringing her wildflowers he'd gathered on his rides around the property, joining her for walks in the evenings after her duties were complete. They talked of everything and nothing, discovering shared values and complementary differences, building a foundation of friendship alongside the growing attraction between them. By the first snowfall in early November, Josephine knew with certainty that she had fallen in love with Riley Grayson. What had begun as gratitude had transformed into something deeper and truer: admiration for his integrity, appreciation for his quiet strength, and affection for his gentle heart. They were walking near the frozen pond on the property, bundled against the cold, when Riley stopped and turned to face her. His expression was serious, his eyes filled with an emotion that made her heart race. Josephine, he began, taking both her gloved hands in his. These past months have been the happiest of my life. Getting to know you, watching you flourish here, seeing your true self emerge from the shadows of your past. It's been a privilege and a joy. She smiled up at him, her breath creating small clouds in the crisp air. "For me as well, Riley." He nodded, seeming to gather his courage. "I had a whole speech prepared, but now that the moment's here, I find I only want to speak from my heart." He took a deep breath. "I love you, Josephine. I think I began loving you that day in McGinty's store, though I didn't recognize it then. And if you'll have me, I want to spend my life showing you just how much." Josephine's heart soared as Riley released her hands only to reach into his coat pocket and withdraw a small velvet box. Kneeling in the snow before her, he opened it to reveal a ring with a perfect diamond flanked by smaller sapphires. "Josephine Owens, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears of happiness filled her eyes as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Riley. I love you, and yes, I'll marry you." His face lit with joy as he stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that promised a lifetime of devotion. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and laughing, Riley pressed his forehead to hers. "I have something to show you," he said mysteriously, taking her hand and leading her back toward the main house. Inside, he guided her upstairs to a room she hadn't entered during her previous visits, a spacious bedroom that was clearly the master suite. On the bed lay the wedding dress she had tried to trade away months ago, carefully cleaned and pressed. "You kept it all this time," she murmured, moving closer to touch the delicate fabric. "I made you a promise," Riley reminded her. "That someday you might wear it again, I hope. I hope you'll consider wearing it when you become my wife." Josephine turned to him, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of his gesture. "I would be honored to wear it, but not because it's beautiful or valuable." She took his face between her hands. "I'll wear it because it brought me to you. Because what began as an act of desperation led me to the greatest happiness I've ever known." Riley's arms encircled her waist, drawing her close. "Then let's not wait too long. What do you say to Christmas? We could be married here with everyone from the ranch in attendance." "Christmas would be perfect," Josephine agreed, her heart full to bursting. "A new beginning at the end of the year." "A new beginning," Riley echoed, sealing the promise with another kiss. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling gently outside and the main house decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons, Josephine stood in an upstairs bedroom, gazing at her reflection in the mirror. The wedding dress fit perfectly, its ivory silk and French lace as beautiful as the day it had been made. Mrs. Fletcher had woven holly berries into Josephine's upswept hair, and her cheeks were flushed with happiness rather than hunger. A knock at the door preceded Mrs. Fletcher's entrance, the older woman's eyes misting as she beheld Josephine in her finery. "Oh, my dear," she said, pressing a hand to her heart. "You're a vision. Mr. Riley won't know what hit him." Josephine smiled, smoothing her hands over the silk. "I can scarcely believe it myself. That day in the store seems like a lifetime ago." "The Lord works in mysterious ways," Mrs. Fletcher said sagely. "Sometimes the darkest moments lead us to our brightest dawns." She held out a small package. "This is from Mr. Riley. He asked me to bring it to you before the ceremony." Curious, Josephine unwrapped the gift to find a delicate gold locket. Inside was a tiny portrait of Riley on one side and on the other an inscription, "From desperation to devotion are beginning." Tears threatened to spill and ruin her carefully applied rouge. "Would you help me put it on?" she asked Mrs. Fletcher, who obliged, fastening the chain around her neck. "There," the older woman said, stepping back to admire the effect. "Now you're ready." They're all waiting downstairs, every hand on the place, clean-shaven and on their best behavior, and Mr. Riley looking like he might burst with pride. Josephine took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. Then we shouldn't keep them waiting any longer. The ceremony was simple but deeply meaningful, held in the grand parlor before a roaring fire. The ranch hands stood in awkward but sincere attendance, while Mrs. Fletcher and her husband served as witnesses. The circuit preacher had ridden through a snowstorm to officiate, his words resonating in the hushed room as Riley and Josephine exchanged vows. "I, Riley James Grayson, take you, Josephine Marie Owens, to be my lawfully wedded wife." Riley's voice was clear and confident, his eyes never leaving hers as he slipped a gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring. "To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." When it was her turn, Josephine's voice trembled slightly with emotion, but her words were equally sincere as she placed a matching band on Riley's finger. "I, Josephine Marie Owens, take you, Riley James Grayson, to be my lawfully wedded husband. To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. By the authority vested in me," the preacher concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Mr. Grayson, you may kiss your bride." Riley's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, and when they turned to face their assembled friends and employees, the cheer that went up warmed the room more effectively than the blazing fire. The celebration lasted well into the night, with music from a fiddle and harmonica, dancing in the cleared dining room, and enough food to feed an army, thanks to Mrs. Fletcher's preparations and Josephine's assistance in the days leading up to the wedding. When the last guest had departed and they were finally alone in the master bedroom, Riley took Josephine's hands in his expression tender. "Mrs. Grayson," he said, testing the sound of her new name, "are you happy?" Josephine reached up to touch his face, memorizing the beloved features that she would wake up to every morning for the rest of her life. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," she assured him. "And you, do you regret buying a wedding dress from a desperate stranger?" Riley laughed softly, pulling her close. "It was the best transaction I ever made," he murmured against her hair, "though I think I got the far better end of the bargain." As snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the Double G Ranch in pristine white, Josephine and Riley began their life together. Their unlikely beginning transformed into a love story that would be told on the ranch for generations to come, how a cowboy bought a wedding dress from a woman in need, and in doing so, found the missing piece of his heart.